Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friday Night Drive Week 9 preview podcast. I'm Josh Welge here with Steve Soucie. Souce, how you doing?
Not too bad. Getting ready to settle in for Week 9 here.
No doubt about it. So you got is that a Cincinnati Reds t-shirt you got for that?
No, this is actually a Cincinnati Tigers t-shirt. So, yeah, the old a 1930s off-brand baseball league that never really took off the ground.
Very, very good. We'll have to save that for a future podcast, so we'll talk about the Cincinnati Tigers.
Yep.
We've got a lot to talk about this week. Obviously, this is a big week. I told Joel Bennett on our podcast on Tuesday that this and Week 1 are the 2 weeks that I really, get extra juiced up for. And certainly is the case for you. Big week with playoff pairings on Saturday night. I know Matt had asked you on Monday, how do you get ready for a week like this, and what's your Friday night going to be looking like?
It's going to be trying to keep track of an awful lot of games out there that ordinarily you wouldn't really think you needed to keep all that much track on. There's over 50 games that involved 4-win teams that are trying to get that 5th win to get themselves into the playoff field. How many of those teams win? How many of those teams lose? And what side of the perspective are they on? Are they a 4-win team that's playing a team that they should beat? Or are they a 4-win team that's playing a team that they shouldn't? Because every one of those teams kind of has a little bit of a permutation to them. Like, is this team supposed to get to 5? Did they manage to do it? Did they get upset? And then it's the other way. Did this 4-win team pull off an upset? So you start to think about, well, how many do we need? How many left? And, of that group right now, it looks like we're going to need, in the high 20s to fill out that field for teams that don't currently already have 5 wins. So, from that group of 4-win teams, how many of them win? Is it going to be like 2 years ago where a lot of them lost games that it looked like on paper they should win? Or is it going to be like last year where they won games that it didn't look like they were supposed to? Or is it going to be a balance of the two? We won't know that until those scores starting coming in on Friday night. And like I said, I'll be targeting about 50 games on Friday night and trying my best to keep on top of all of them because every single one of them has an effect on the field, where they go in, and then the next step in that process is what's that final number going to come out to be? How many of them got that 5th win? And if and then how many 4-win teams might we need to fill out that field? We should have some of those answers should probably be pretty clear by about midnight on Friday night. It's just going to be a lot of chaos before we get to that point.
You mentioned tracking results that maybe normally that you're not tracking. Well, I'm going to throw out some teams that maybe you're not used to having to track if they're winning Friday night. I'm talking about defending state champions. Seuss, we could be in a very unusual situation in that 4 of the defending 8 state champions are not even in the playoffs this year. Chicago Christian, I'm not altogether shocked about their scenario. They're out of it already. They lost so many seniors off of last year's team, almost all of their starters. DePaul Prep, the defending 4A champion, if they were going to be up, they were going to be up to 8A, I think, if they would have made the playoffs. I looked at their schedule today. I mean, they played a really difficult CCL schedule. Fenwick, Carmel, on down the road. But the 2 teams that are 4-4, well, yeah, I think one of them, they need an extra win on Friday, is Loyola defending 8A state champion and Althoff Catholic from Belleville 1A. Althoff, I guess I'm not as surprised about them because they have the guy named Deere Hill that's playing for Oregon right now, and he's playing pretty good. But, man, that Loyola situation is really that's a shocker.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird situation. We've talked about it a lot. With them not having a Week 2 game, it really hurt their point compilation system because, most teams, even though the Catholic League is really strong, one of the things about the Catholic League is it's hard to get a bunch of wins in the Catholic League. So even though you're playing good opposition, a lot of teams will, have a really strong team on their schedule and they're likely to win 9 or 8 games. Well, in the Catholic League, really strong teams are only winning 6 or 7 games. So while this hasn't been a problem for Loyola in the past because, they're getting 7 or 8 wins, at the minimum, so they're in the field. So it's just a seeding question at that point in time. Well, this year was a little bit different. I mean, they had one game less. They They're sitting right now at 4-3 on the season, but for all intents and purposes, the fact that they didn't play a game. What's important here is the wins. The losses don't matter. Like if Loyola does win and they finish 5-3 on the season, they're not seeded ahead of all the 5-4 teams because they're 5-3. They're seeded as one of the 5-win teams. It's the wins that matter, not the losses in that situation. So right now, for all intents and purposes, Loyola is being graded as a 4-4 team, even though they don't have a loss, because that's the situation. Because if they lose on Friday night to Mount Carmel, they're going to finish 4-4. They're still in the 4-win group. So they'd be scored against all of the other 4-win teams, whether or not they can get in. They have a shot at that. It helped that Maryville, Indiana, who they did play in the non-conference, finished their season with 7 wins, at least for playoff points compilation, because they start a week earlier. So anything they do this week does not count. So they're done. Maryville gives Loyola 7 points. Their week 2 game gives them none, and then they have to add in the rest of their Catholic League points. So Loyola's got a shot here. If we need 4-win teams, they're going to be pretty high on that list. But interestingly enough, there's another team in the Catholic League that also needs to win to get in the same situation. And if they do, that ends up backdoor hurting Loyola. If Joliet Catholic can beat Providence, that would take a point away from Loyola because they played Providence. So right now I'm projecting Providence to win that game and projecting Loyola with, potentially enough points to maybe still get into the field. But Joliet Catholic could twofold hurt them by upsetting Providence. Not only would they jump Loyola on that list of 4-win teams, they'd also take a point away from them in the process.
Yeah, I remember. Last year too, with Glenbard West and SC Catholic, there was a couple powerhouse programs that were just scratching and clawing to get to the playoffs, and they didn't get there. And this year is no different with Loyola. You mentioned Joliet Catholic, but getting back to just Loyola and Aldhoff. Loyola. Yeah, getting that 5th win is going to be a little difficult with a little program called Mount Carmel on Friday. Aldhoff, they got to go on the road to Canelan, which is a larger school that's already in the playoffs. Just kind of how dicey are those two situations. And if either of them were to lose on Friday, where do you assess where they're at?
Well, I think Loyola's, like I said, in a fairly decent shot if we do end up needing 4-win teams. But there's layers to this. It's like you look at somebody like St. Rita, for example, who enters Friday night at 4-4 playing IC Catholic. If they win, they're in, obviously, with 5 wins. If they lose, then they rocket right to the top of the playoff point list for 4-win teams because they have over 50. So that's just another machination that when you're thinking about whether or not Loyola gets in, you need to watch teams like St. Rita. They're probably going to get in either way because if we need 4-win teams, I believe St. Rita would be the first one to go in if they are a 4-win team. But if they're not, then that clears up the clarity a little bit. They're already in, so there's just one less spot that's kind of out there in utero for them to try to grab. Althoff's a little bit more complicated because if they lose their 4-5 and their point situation is not nearly as good, they played some good football teams, but those teams finished with 5 wins, 6 wins, and they didn't have some of those teams did not have quite the season that you're used to them having. So they would be a little bit farther down the list in the 4-win group, and that's a tough game for them. Like you mentioned, no more Dier Hill. The other Division I kids that were on that team last year were not there. This isn't the Althoff. They're still a good team, but this is not the Althoff team that was in the mix last year. It's not anywhere near that. So I would say they're an underdog in trying to win that game up at Caneland. I think they have to win it to get into the playoff field.
There are some quality teams out there that are fighting for their playoffs lives, for lack of a better phrase, this week. You mentioned we've already talked about Loyola and Aldhoff. You mentioned St. Rita. They got to play IC Catholic this Friday. That is obviously no pushover there. Sycamore has to go on the road to Cahokia. However, I looked and they're in a pretty decent spot playoff point wise as well. Edwardsville a little bit further down the road as far as playoff points. There's a lot of quality programs that really need that 5th win on Friday.
Yeah, and some of those games are really kind of up in the air. Like you mentioned, Edwardsville, they're going over to they're playing a team from St. Louis, Decimet Jesuit. that is typically one of the better teams in St. Louis. They look like they're a little down this year. They're currently sitting at 3-5. But from all reports, Edwardsville looks a little bit down this year as well. So will Edwardsville get win number 5? What happens if they don't? I mean, they become another one of those teams that kind of has to hold their breath and hope for one of those 4-win teams. You know, the field needs 3 to 5 4-win teams because they'd be a good candidate for that. But they can get that 5th win and eliminate that possibility. But to say that it's any more than a toss-up, that I would be lying, because that's what I think that game is too.
You know, you mentioned Loyola, and they're such a unique situation too, given that week 2 game that we keep going back to. I mean, if they were able to find a team that they could win, you know, that week, or even lose and get some more playoff points, then they're in an entirely different situation. Obviously, we just were presented a couple proposals for a different way of doing things, expanded playoffs, but there's also that scheduling component. I realize there's probably not many teams out there that are going to be, you know, shedding tears for Loyola. But do you think that people might see Loyola's situation be like, you know, we already knew the scheduling was a mess, but that could be us next year or 2 years from now? And does that change the, you know, the way the thought process at all?
You know, I don't know if it changes the thought process, but I think what really people are starting to realize over the years, if you've had any level of success, scheduling is tricky now. It just is. Like, that's just a simple matter of the fact. I know there are teams out there that have full schedules, and if you ask them to be honest about it, they had to really work hard to get those schedules. They had a lot of conversations. They talked to a lot of people, and eventually there were some games that were put together this year that it was throw your hands up in frustration. We didn't have any other options. This is the way that we had to go. It's not the way we wanted to go, but we don't have a choice. So I think ultimately, if people are honest about it and look at how much trouble it has been for some of these schools to fill 9-game schedules, you know, I think we have to really get to the point now where we, at least before you dismiss some of these things out of hand, you really have to be honest about what situation you're in right now. Is this potentially something that might be better? Is this potentially something that maybe people are making too big of a deal out of? The one thing about these proposals that have been coming across the table, I think people in general are being way too quick to dismiss it on the grounds that they think that there aren't as many problems with the current system as there actually are.
Yeah, I mean, I look at situations where, I mean, Montini had to find a team from Michigan at the 11th hour. I look at a situation that, you know, Marquette from Ottawa, they played a team from Wisconsin that was so far away that they didn't even get to play in either of their home field. They had to find a central location. I mean, it's kind of fun to see, let's see how they match up with teams from other state, but I really don't think that that's the best solution to what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure either of these, you know, these two proposals out here fixes all of the problems. I do think they may fix some. They might create others, but to bury your head in the sand and say, no, I don't want this, I don't want to do this, I think you're avoiding the fact that there are some programs out there that are having some serious issues in a lot of different areas that I think we all owe it to ourselves to at least investigate options and think more critically than I'm happy with the way things are now, I'm going to bury my head in the sand.
No doubt. You know, while we're talking about that, people might want to go to Friday Night Drive. We released today, or should Roxanne release that, I think, a mock-up for what the 1A, 2A would look like, correct?
Yeah, that was what was released today. They plan to slow drip the other classifications over the next couple of weeks. But yeah, that was information that they gave me last night, and I was able to put it together for publication today. So, yeah. But yeah, just, I mean, I would suggest anybody who's looking at it, just look at it with an open mind and just kind of give it a comparison to what you're doing right now and some of the pratfalls that we're experiencing right now.
Before we take a break and look at some of the top games, you know, math-wise, where we are right now, I think 221 teams have got to that 5th win, right?
It's actually 223 now because we've had a couple of little minor developments. There was a forfeit to East Moline United, which got them to the 5-win load. So it's 223 now.
223, and then there's 1 4-4 versus 4-4 matchup. So math-wise, that's leaving 32, I believe, you know, 4 wins, and then kind of see where things go with those results.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of that's when you kind of get into a breakdown, and the way that I break them down when we come to that situation is who are those 4-4s playing? Are they playing teams with a better record than 4-4? Are they playing teams with a worse record than 4-4? Logic would say the teams that are playing a record worse than 4-4, those teams should probably win. And in most situations, almost all of them do. But we've had years where they haven't. And every time one gets upset, that opens up the door for another potential 4-win team to get in. But on the flip side, you have the 4-4 teams that are playing teams with better records. In most situations, most of those teams lose. But every once in a while, you have a couple that stand up. And when they do pick off those upsets, that line goes in the other direction. That's one less 4-win team that's going to get in every time that happens. Usually those scales kind of balance. You'll maybe have 3 from column A and 3 from column B, and the line doesn't move. But sometimes you'll have 5 from column A and 1 from column 2, and it'll move 4 spots, and all the 4-win teams go away, which is almost what happened last year when we only had 1 get in. But like I said, the previous year, that line went the other way. We had 6. So it's right now I think we're at that tipping point statewide with participating teams and how the math goes over the course of the season to where as long as we're at this number of teams and in this format, this line is always going to be hovering right around the jump line. I don't think we're ever going to have a situation where we've got 15 4-win teams in, and I don't think we're ever going to have a situation where we've got 10 too many 5-win teams. Like I think those days are gone. I think what we're going to have is that line is always going to be very, very close. 1, 2, 3 teams, one way or the other.
Stuff we're going to be following on Friday night just to see what level of chaos we will be seeing with these teams at 10 or 10:30 on Friday night. Definitely we'll be watching. So let's take a quick break, and we'll look at some of the top games for Week 9.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at sgkr.law.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brenton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
In Illinois and into Iowa, the story of Shaw Media is a story of trust. Since 1851, we've been informing, connecting, and reflecting the communities we serve, large and small, rural and urban, suburban, and river towns alike. With dozens of local newspapers, radio stations, magazines, and specialty brands like Friday Night Drive and Starve Rock Country, we meet people wherever they are. We shine a light on local government. We celebrate Friday night touchdowns. We tell the stories that shape your day, from neighborhood heroes to the Chicago Bears. But what truly sets us apart? It's our people. The award-winning journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers who live here, work here, and care deeply about what matters most to you. We don't just report the news. We're part of the fabric of the places we serve, from the Mississippi to the Illinois, from the Fox all the way to the chain of lakes. Trusted for generations, still earning it every day. Shaw Media, your most trusted local source.
Back on the Friday Night Drive Week 9 preview podcast. And Soucie, we actually start on Thursday night this week. A matchup that I'm just going to say it's looking a little bit different than it was looking about 3 weeks ago. Sandburg playing Lincoln Way East at one point this year. That was looking like a potential 8-0 versus 8-0 matchup. They were undefeated. Sandburg took a couple losses. Of course, Lincoln Way East, they lost last week. But even more noteworthy is Jonas Williams, the USC commit, did not play last week. Sounds like it's a little bit kind of sketchy about he's sort of at a day-to-day. We'll see on Thursday night. Let's just say theoretically Lincoln Way East takes another loss. How does that upset the apple cart in the 8A bracket?
You know, it gets pretty interesting when you start to look at it because, I mean, we've talked about it before. You know, with Lincoln Way East losing that one game, it really wasn't going to tumble them that much because we've only got one undefeated team in the class, but there looks to be a lot more one-loss teams in the 8A field right now. So, you know, you're talking about a situation where Lincoln Way East would probably fall down to maybe the the 10 seed, the 9-10 seed in that situation. And it's pretty pivotal where that would be, because if you start talking about maybe they're a 9 seed if they lose that game, I mean, that potentially means that you can pretty much throw Mount Carmel and Lincoln Way East playing each other in the state final out the window. If they were a 9 seed, you can throw it out of a window on the semifinals too. That would potentially be, provided everybody's healthy and everybody's going, you're going to get top seeded Mount Carmel and 9 seed Lincoln Way East in the quarterfinals. That would be the way that would break down if the seeds played out that way. So obviously earlier than anyone would want, but that would be a potential scenario right there, because I genuinely believe that they would probably be in the 9-10 variety, leaning towards 9 if they were to lose that game, and no one else in that top group got upset as well in week 9 to fall into the 2-loss group. So yeah, that would potentially be really sloppy for the 8A bracket that we hoped we'd get in comparison to what we would get in reality.
Well, the other thing is that then Lincoln Way East is potentially looking at, at least on paper, a more difficult first round opponent. And on that opponent side, I mean, there's probably like a 20 seed or whatever that we're probably thinking, well, of the potential opponents we're going to see in round 1, it'll never be Lincoln Way East.
Yeah, I mean, you look in that groove right now, and you're talking about Lockport, Lyons, Stevenson. That would kind of be in the group that might potentially be paired with a 9 seed at this point in time. Those schools probably weren't thinking that Lincoln Way East, you're right, would be an option for them, kind of sitting in that range of the draw. I mean, it just logistically, you wouldn't have guessed it that Lincoln Way East would have a hard time potentially staying in the top 10 seeds. So that would be, something that, still got to play the game. And to be fair to everyone involved, Sandburg hasn't been playing as well as they were early in the season either. So Lincoln Way East defense, coupled with potentially maybe a backup quarterback going in that game in place of Jonas as a safety maneuver. Like you said, I mean, all we've been able to get officially out of Lincoln Way East is that he's day-to-day. I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be surprised if he's playing tomorrow night. I don't really expect him to. So, I'd like to see him. I'm going to go attend to the game, and see what happens. But I'm not expecting him to play tomorrow night. We'll see. I don't know. I have no factual basis other than what I expect that program to do in most situations. Give him that extra week. They know they're in the playoffs. They'll figure out the other stuff when the time comes. So, I mean, even with him, I think you're potentially looking, and I've talked about this before, you're looking at them maybe being a 3 seed in the bracket, maybe. So, if they end up doing that, then that would keep them on the opposite side of Mount Carmel. But that's a long way down the road. I think right now they're just trying to get him as healthy as humanly possible for when they do put him back on the field.
I know he broke that one record a few weeks ago. Where do we know where he is at as far as the passing yards record? Is he? He's a
little over 400 yards short of that record. So okay. He broke the touchdown record, and then I believe he was sitting just over 400 yards away from the passing yardage record heading into the Naperville North game last week, which he obviously did not play in, so he hadn't had any stats. But I believe that's where he was sitting. Somewhere the number started with a 4. I'm not sure exactly how many yards, but it's a little over 400 yards.
Okay, something else to follow. Obviously, Lincoln Way East is thinking in terms of we'd like to get 5 more wins, but
yep.
But the records are nice too. A matchup this week that's a really dynamite matchup: Coal City, Wilmington. Both programs, they took losses very early in the year, but both have been rolling. Both are going to be factors. Wilmington, I believe, in the 2A bracket, most likely. Coal City in 4A. What do you make of that matchup?
This is a very fierce rivalry that goes back for a long time. These two programs kind of hinge both of them had a lot of postseason success. They've got state trophies in the building, but they often hinge their season success on what happens in this game. These are the memories that these kids talk about after the fact. Yeah, you made the semifinals, but what did you do in the Coal City Wilmington game? That's kind of the way that this thing works. And I can't honestly remember a time when I felt like both teams on both sidelines were playing outstanding football. Good football, yes, but they're both playing great football right now. Coal City's showing dimensions on offense that I don't recall them ever really showing in terms of throwing the ball more than they've done and effectively doing so. Wilmington's defense seems to be on a level like they rarely reach, and that's saying something for that defense. I mean, they are keeping people to nothing. I mean, so it's one of those situations where you've got two teams that are really riding a lot of momentum, playing excellent football, and they're just going to collide into one another. And this thing could go 100 different ways, and I don't think I would be that shocked by any result that you told me, because I know how capable both of these teams really are.
You know, speaking of what I would characterize as a recent fierce rivalry, Nazareth is going to be playing St. Francis this week. Interesting, last 2 years, those teams have met in week 9. St. Francis coming on top, and then Nazareth has beat them in the semifinals. That will not be happening this year with Nazareth moving up to 6A. Nevertheless, very interesting matchup in this game. St. Francis, I'm going to be kind of watching to see if their starting quarterback, Brock Phillips, is able to come back this week. He missed the week 8 game. They won nevertheless. Nazareth, on the other hand, boy, they are really on a roll. Ever since that Mount Carmel game where they lost, I know they went full-time, I think, with their quarterback, Jackson Fela, and they've just been rolling. I think they put up 40 points, over 40 points in each of their last 4 games.
Yeah, I saw Nazareth all the way back in week 1, and to be honest with you, I believe in Coach Tim Rackey and what that program can do. But I'm like, boy, I feel like they're going to have a little bit of an uphill climb here after seeing them. Even though they won that game against Kankakee, it felt a little ragged while I was watching it. I'm like, I didn't really know, but what they've done, they've just kind of, it seems strange to say this, it feels like they've flown a little under the radar. They took that one loss early in the year, and ever since, it's just like, tough team in front of us, W. Tough team in front of us, W. They're just stacking wins. And for a program that has had some scary moments in terms of getting into the playoffs, including the year that they won the state title with a 4-5 record, they breezed into the clinching a playoff spot this year. So kind of a different philosophy. And you look at St. Francis, and you and I both took it back in their week 1 game, and it was kind of a similar type of thing. I'm sitting here watching them, and I'm like, I know they have weapons. They hadn't quite figured out how to kind of utilize them quite yet. And defensively, I was wondering whether or not on a week-to-week basis, especially in their schedule, they'd be able to hold people in check as effectively as they need to. They seem to have solved some of those issues, but they have given up quite a few points. So I think this might be a back and forth kind of affair where both of these teams kind of flex the muscles that they do have. And when the dust clears, who knows? I think this is a really good capper to the regular season for both of these teams.
Yeah, that's my question for this game from a St. Francis perspective is I don't question that they can put up points, but can they slow down Nazareth? Because, defensively they've shown a few holes in some of their games this year. As far as Nazareth, they're going to be moving up to 6A. Obviously, there's a little team called East St. Louis that's been residing in 6A. Do you look at them right now as being in opposite ends of the bracket? Is that still yet to be determined?
That line is razor thin between because 1 through 6A are divided. The brackets are divided north and south.
Yeah.
And for a couple of weeks there, they had slipped into the south bracket, but they have now moved back into the north bracket away from where East St. Louis was. But it's very precarious. We could have some changes made that would get them, back in the other direction. Because one of the things that's really important to keep in perspective about 6A, Chatham-Glenwood, an undefeated team down by Springfield, has been teetering between 5 and 6A. They are a clear southern bracket team. So if they were to leave 6A and go back to 5A, then there would be a bracket vacancy in the south bracket, most likely, because whoever would replace that team in the 6A field would likely come from the north. So where's that line? Is Nazareth back on it? Do they jump back over into the south bracket? So it's the context of the 6A field hinges very deeply on who ends up in 5 and who ends up in 6, because not only Glenwood is on that fence, the team under is Dunlap, which is another Southern team. So you start talking about, okay, well, if the Southern teams are moving out, someone has to fill those vacancies in that bracket. And if a natural Southern team doesn't come in from the upward line, and to be fair, there aren't a lot of Southern teams 7A and above. So the logical juxtaposition in that situation would be a Northern team is coming in and could potentially push Nazareth back into the South. So that's the line to watch in 6A. Where's that geographical break going to be? Where are Glenwood and Dunlap? Are Glenwood and Dunlap in 6A, or are they in 5A? If they're in 5A, I think the odds are a lot greater that Nazareth goes into the South bracket in 6.
You mentioned Glenwood, very fine program, good team from Central Illinois. Two other good ones with a really good rivalry play each other this week. I'm talking about Rochester and Sacred Heart Griffin. What do you know about these teams, and what do you make about this matchup?
Maybe not quite at the level that we're used to of back in the day when it was the Leonard Bowl between veteran coach Ken Leonard, who has now since retired, and his son Derek, who is still at Rochester. Maybe not quite at the level of those teams, but both of these two teams can put up points. I expect it to be a high-scoring game. I lean towards Rochester in this one. Would not be shocked to see Sacred Heart Griffin win the game. But, both of these teams are probably an interesting factor in a 4A South bracket, ultimately, that I don't know if it has that many powerhouse teams that could potentially match up with the 4A North, where I think there are a couple of really good teams lurking there. But it is going to be interesting to see what the weight comes out of that one, because, if you think like I do that Rochester's going to win the game, that will position them, pretty highly on the seed chart. If they don't, those teams move down towards the middle, and then I think it becomes kind of a chaotic situation. So interesting game to kind of ferret out how the 4A South stack's going to go.
We talked about playoff stuff, but there's some games this weekend that are going to be determining conference championships. One of them in the Duquesne Conference that we like talking about, the chaos it is the Duquesne Conference a lot. Right now there's a three-way tie atop the lead with St. Charles North, Batavia, and Wheaton-Warrenville South. Batavia plays at Wheaton-Warrenville South on Friday. Batavia is no stranger here with being on top of the Duquesne. I think I wrote in my preview, they've won or shared it 4 or 5 times since the conference started in 2018. Wheaton South, on the other hand, has never won a Duquesne Conference title. In fact, I look back, the last time they won a league title was 2014 when they won the DuPage Valley Conference. We followed Wheaton-Warrenville South. They've been a great program over many years under multiple head coaches. I would say this is one of the biggest games in that program in quite some time.
I would agree, and it's I think it's over. The general overview of the Duquesne this year has not disappointed, where you kind of go into the week schedule, you look at it, you say, I don't know if we're going to get a close game this week, and then all of the games are close. I mean, it feels like that's what's happening in this league this year. You've got kind of a resurgence here from Wheaton-Warrenville South, a similar kind of resurgence from Glenbard North, which is kind of, added to the depth of an already deep league. Geneva slipped off a little bit here, but still competitive in those games. So it feels like almost every week you can't take a week off in this conference. If you do, you might get burnt. And this is an interesting. This wouldn't have been one of the games that I would have circled at the beginning of the year that would potentially decide who the conference champion is. But now looking at the results over the course of the season, I guess it's not all that surprising.
It's funny. Wheaton-Warrenville South has been good the last few years. Yep. They just have not been at the level they were, 90s or whatever. But that win they had over St. Charles North in Week 7 and the way they did it really kind of turned my antenna up a little bit. That maybe there's a little bit more there than meets the eye with Wheaton-Warrenville South. On the other side of Batavia, we talked about teams that have maybe flown a little bit under the radar. I might put Batavia in that group. I mean, they've only lost 2 games this year, and one of them was on the last-second field at Glenbard West, and the other was that wackiness that happened with St. Charles North. I mean, they're as dangerous a 2-win team as there is out there.
When you look at their 2 losses, like you said, dangerously close to potentially heading into this game with the opportunity to be undefeated. Instead, those 2 losses kind of filtered them down, but both of those losses to obviously quality programs. They elected to play up in the 7A field. They would have been in 6A had they not. I'm not sure how it all shakes out, but when I look at Batavia now and where they would likely be seed-wise with a win on Friday night, they're probably going to be like a 10 or 11 seed. And I can't imagine being all that excited to see Batavia in my quad as, say, like a 6 seed, potentially looking at them as a second-round opponent. That would be, for me, I would be like, wait a minute, I'm a 6 seed. What am I doing potentially playing Batavia in the second round? I mean, that could be the way that this plays out, and that's only provided if Batavia wins that game. If they don't, they fall even farther down the bracket where potentially they might even be on the road in the first round if they lose this game. So that to me would be crazy if you're looking at your pairings and you're in the 15-18 game and you're looking, oh, Batavia's coming to our place. Oh boy, that's exciting. But that's going to be the makeup of 7A this year. You're going to have a lot of teams with a couple of losses on that draw. That middle pack of seeds is going to have some real dangerous football teams because, like I said, we're not going to have an undefeated. I don't think we're going to have an undefeated team in that field. I'm pretty confident of it at this point in time. So that's obviously going to just there's going to be a trickle-down effect. Your top seed's going to have one loss. The group of one-loss teams is relatively small. So, 10 through 15, 7-2 teams, 6-3 teams right in the middle of that draw. So definitely wide open in 7A.
Speaking of 7A, I mean, one of the teams that could be very near is a high seed in 7A is Yorkville, sitting here right now at 7-1, and they reside in we talk about chaos that is the Southwest Prairie West Division. As soon as I think I have it figured out, I don't have it figured out at all. But they will be playing at Bolingbrook on Friday, and I do know with certainty that they will be playing for a conference title, both of them. Yorkville, I've seen them a few times, playing really good defense, run the ball, their kind of game. But, man, Bolingbrook, they are as hot of a team as there is out there. They've really been rolling the last few weeks.
Yeah, ever since that loss to Oswego mid-season, I don't know what switch they flipped, but I think they would be like, well, I hope we can flip this all the time because they have played really strong. I mean, they've corrected a lot of the defensive issues that I think were plaguing them early in the year. I mean, they gave up a bunch of points in their non-conference schedule. They lost to Homewood Flossmoor. They won against Simeon, but they gave up a bunch of points. They gave a bunch of points to Oswego. But ever since they kind of brought the clamps down, and offensively, this has been a really impressive team. I felt like at the beginning of the year they were heavy run, but now they've kind of added a little bit of an aerial component, and their quarterback, good dual threat, capable of throwing it and running it and kind of, getting defenses on their heels a little bit. It's like, well, what's he going to do with it? He's going to tuck it and take off. Is he going to throw it? I got to worry about this. So they're much more viable now offensively than maybe they were early in the year where they have more things that they can do.
Yeah, pretty tough assignment for Yorkville, but I've learned that they like tough assignments. They seem to do pretty well against tough assignments, but it should be a great game on Friday. It's going to be the game that I'm going to be at. Soucie, we could keep talking on about great games. Obviously, the West Suburban Silver, Upstate 8, other two teams have teams that are playing each other for league championships, but we could talk forever. Before we get out of here, just kind of your final parting thoughts about Week 9 and what you're going to be really keeping your eye on. I know those 4-4 games for sure.
You're kind of looking at trying to get a wide swath of all the games because, there are going to be some upsets that happen in Week 9. There are teams that right now you're thinking, well, that's probably a top 5 seed. They may lose that game. They tumble down. And in the chaos of the evening, you tend to forget that until you're looking at it later. We're like, wait a minute, I thought they were going to be at the top of the bracket. They fall down. So it's one of those rare situations where you're really watching almost everything because, there might be a rogue playoff point that somebody picks up that allows them to jump two spots on the seed chart, changes the whole bracket. So every one of those games, there's practically 250 of them if you count teams with out-of-state opponents, well over 200 on Friday night, a smaller handful on Saturday that will make the final shaping of it all. But there's a lot going on, and it's hard to kind of figure it all out in real time. But it's one of those things that I'm going to be trying to juggle as many of them in the air as I possibly can. And when the dust clears, we're going to see what happens. Always fascinating night, always a fascinating weekend. And it's one of the things that I most enjoy that I get to be a part of on a yearly basis in whatever role I play in it, because there's just there's so many levels to it. It's really, one game comes in and I'm like, wait, is that real? And then you look at it and you figure out where it fits in the context of the whole thing. And it's a really fun system, and I really enjoy it. I mean, I know there's a lot of heartbreak that comes on this weekend for a lot of people, but there's a lot of joy too that comes with it as well. And those are always the really fun stories.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to 2:30 or 3 in the morning when you're still up compiling, you're putting out your brackets for people that are following you. But Friday night should be a lot of fun. A lot of good stuff coming on Friday Night Drive. Suits, I know you recorded with Mason Schweizer, Kankakee Area podcast. Eddie and JT will be back tomorrow for South and West, and then you'll be back in the command center with Matt Rodewald working deep into the night Friday night. We're going to get out of here. We're going to get out of here. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. For Steve Soucie, I'm Josh Welge. Everybody have a great week and a great week 9.